Hi, everybody. I was so excited to hear from some of you last week when I relaunched my channel. I'm so happy to be back week to week. I really am. I've been looking forward to this. The last series of videos that I posted over the summer was all about flying monkeys, and in that I shared in a 4-part series the story of my relationship with my Aunt Mary, what an important person she was and is to me, and how much she kept me going through the worst of times. And then my mother manipulated her to be her flying monkey, to pass information to her, to basically take my mother's side, to talk to me and treat me like I was victimizing my mother. And just how traumatizing that was for me. Very traumatizing. If you wanted an update, I decided in, probably October or so, I wrote her a letter. I felt like I would be able to communicate better that way and just state things more efficiently and clearly. I explained how painful my childhood was and how bad it had gotten during my adolescence. I explained to her how important she was to me, that she was about the only space in the world where I felt safe for a large portion of my upbringing. And I told her, I'm a better mother because of her. I think about how she made me feel as a child, and that helps me know how to be toward my son. That she was that source of love that has allowed me to understand how to show somebody love. And then I shared very clearly how damaging her behavior toward me had been since I went no contact with my mother. And I explained my great desire to find a way, to find a path forward that doesn't involve me terminating contact with her like I've had to do with so many others, but that this is not safe for me, the way she's behaving, that my health is at risk, and that has to be my priority. That, I explained to her, she's unknowingly been, I explained what flying monkeys were, and explained to her that I know she didn't realize she was doing this, but that she was helping my mother continue to abuse me. And I went no contact with her to protect myself from that abuse, and this is putting me in a very terrible position. And just asked her to please hear me out, to consider what if everything that I'm saying is true. She herself was in an extremely abusive relationship with her daughter's biological father many, many years ago, many decades ago. I don't know much about it. It happened before I was born, but she had, from my understanding, she feared for her life when she left that relationship, and she doesn't talk about it much. She has a little bit here and there. So I tried to frame what I was going through in terms she could understand, and I brought this man up and said, can you imagine if you were trying to talk to me about what that man did to you? And I would always say things like, he didn't hit you, he just bumped you while he was walking past you in the hallway, but you misinterpreted it just like you always do. He loved you so much, but you turned away from him and left, and now he's stuck abandoned and without you. Maybe if you'd acted better, then he wouldn't have acted that way toward you. Did you consider that? And asked how she would feel if I was talking to her that way. And then I said, that's how you make me feel when you say these things to me. I sent her the letter, and I was terrified. I really just was very emotionally dysregulated that day. I was shaking a lot. I had I don't know why, I had a lot of just tears randomly that weren't even from sadness, or I guess just from stress. I'm not normally like that, but I was that day, just waiting for her response. And I was so afraid that she was going to reply and tell me there's no way my mom has this disorder, that I'm crazy, and just to have that invalidation solidified. I was absolutely terrified of that happening. Fortunately, that isn't what happened. The response was okay. She did apologize. She said that she was sorry that she wasn't there for me when I needed her the most, and that did mean a lot to me. But at the same time, she didn't really validate anything that I said. We ended up having a phone call a couple weeks later, and she never really said anything that gave indication that she understood that I had been abused, that this was a decision I had to make to save myself. She didn't really express support. She wasn't, she was very neutral, which makes me think deep down, maybe she does think that this isn't as extreme as I've said, but doesn't want to say it anymore because she knows it hurts my feelings. It's been tough. Right now, we've just been very low contact. That seems to be working for me. She's on my Facebook, but I have it where she can't see what I post because I just, if I wanted to post something about something I'm doing or my son, I don't want to have to stop and think, well, if my Aunt Mary sees this, then she'll tell my mom, so maybe I don't want to post this and have to be filtering everything through that process. So I'm not sure where it's going to go from here. And I think it's okay in difficult situations like this to just take things one step at a time. I did make it clear to her that we may have to terminate contact and shared how devastating that would be. And she did say she doesn't want that to happen. So, I'm like I said, I'm just staying very low contact and will respond as we move step by step on what to do. It's timely for me to talk about the topic we're discussing today, which is trust. I was actually going to make this just one episode, but as I began to dig deep into it and kind of make an outline for what we would need to talk about, I realized there's no way this could all be sufficiently covered in just one episode. It's probably going to be 2 to 3 episodes, at least 2. Trust is something us survivors of narcissistic parental abuse intensely struggle with. Trusting others and trusting ourselves. It's one of the greatest challenges, and the fear associated with those struggles of trust can be extreme. They can be paralyzing. And it's no wonder why. Look at the story I just shared. This very extremely important person in my life who was at one point like the center of my universe hurt me in such a terrible way that this person that abused me turned her, in a sense, against me. It's no wonder that we have problems with trust. So I want to start this off by saying it's not your fault that you have these struggles. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to feel guilty about or badly about yourself. Anyone who has been through what we have would certainly struggle with trust. But now that we better understand our situation, now that we have more knowledge, we're in a position to really explore this topic and to work on it and to restore our ability to have some trust in the people of the world. But let's start by being open with what has happened to us. The very first person we were supposed to be able to trust absolutely and completely, not only did she let us down, but she caused us terrible pain and damage. Our mothers were the ones that were supposed to keep us safe, but instead, they were the source of the harm. They're the ones that we needed protected from. And then on top of that, as all of it was happening, there was really no one there to defend us, to stand up for us, or to help us. I think of my dad, whom I really love, and he died in 2013, and I miss him every day. I really do. But he was definitely an enabler of my mother. There's no way around that. I love my dad. I have a lot of compassion for him. He had a lot of mental health issues, and I wish he could have had a better life than he did. But he did sit by and allow this behavior from my mother. He excused it. I don't know how many times when I went to him wanting help, and he'd say, well, you know how your mother is, and would just excuse it away while I was hurting so bad I would feel like I could barely breathe at times. We were just left on our own to endure this horrible form of abuse, while everyone around us either excused it away or remained oblivious. I don't know how many times when I was a teenager, I had to listen to someone say to me, you have such a great mom. You're so lucky to have such a great mom. And I would literally feel like the inside of my chest was on fire when people were saying these things to me. It was the most isolating and validating feeling. And it made me feel so helpless because I knew how very cruel my mother was to me. And she never showed an ounce of remorse for it. She never did. She never has. I'm here now in my late 40s, and never once has my mom expressed any sorrow or remorse for anything she's ever done to me. She just never showed any care about my feelings. I was always disregarded. But, how could I explain that to people? I didn't really understand what was wrong myself. I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't have the words. I knew my mother was causing me suffocating levels of pain. But I couldn't understand why she just wouldn't listen to me or hear me. That was the worst part of it. It wasn't even how she was treating me, but when I just so desperately tried to get her to listen, she never would. She never cared. That was the part that was so traumatic. She just never cared about what she was doing to me. And I kept believing if I tried harder, that it would change and someday she would treat me better. I didn't understand what was going on. I couldn't ask for help, and no one came to rescue me. And so our trust in basically everyone was so profoundly damaged at such a young age, and trusting in others to not hurt us, to be there for us the way they say they will, to feel like we even deserve that since we haven't been given it. It's natural for that to be very difficult because people caring about us, people protecting us, people acting in fully trustworthy ways, that's not the pattern we've experienced in this world. And then when you add to that because of the abuse we suffered and the damage it did to us, we tend to form relationships with other people who are either narcissists too, or they're just really unhealthy, emotionally immature, just undeveloped, not functional people. And that's for a couple reasons. One, we don't recognize the red flags, or at least we didn't. We've been mistreated so much and unhealthy. Unfortunately, that's what's familiar to us. And everyone, no matter who they are, tends to gravitate toward the familiar without even realizing it, even when what is familiar is really bad and harmful. So the people we've gravitated towards tend to be people who will inevitably hurt us very deeply. And then secondly, when we meet healthy people who are emotionally mature, because of the damage from the abuse and the warped perception of ourselves, we get scared. We feel out of place. We have that imposter syndrome that, if people understood that I don't actually deserve to be here, and always being fearful that you're going to be found out, even though you don't even know what exactly there is that's going to be found out, but that you don't belong. Imposter syndrome is a topic really in and of itself we should dedicate a whole episode to, but basically we feel out of place when we're around functional, healthy people. We just immediately assume, deep down, someone like this would never want to have a real friendship with someone like me. And then anticipating the hurt and pain we think will inevitably come, we push those people away. And that means that even as adults, as we left our abusive homes and we ventured out into the world, we ended up deeply hurt by person after person when we were already in so much pain as it was. I mean, I guess just to touch on that, I've talked a little bit about some of the unhealthy relationships I've had. I mean, I dated somebody I was so in love with, and we dated for a long time. He cheated on me. I don't remember how much I shared of this, but I actually got pregnant and I had a miscarriage. And he cheated on me through that. And just days after the miscarriage, he left me to go be with the person he was cheating with. And it wasn't just, I mean, that obviously would be traumatizing enough, but it was the way he went about it. He broke up with me purposely in a way that would be even more hurtful. And when I asked him, like, why would you do this way? He said he wanted to see the look on my face. He really received pleasure from the idea of making sure that this breakup would be as hurtful as possible. He, received pleasure from seeing my pain. And that's what made it just 100 times harder. I mean, if I was going to break up, if I was dating somebody and it just, this wasn't a person I wanted to be with, and I'm sure most of, all of us, I would hope, would understand this feeling of, like, I would feel really bad. I would want to let that person down as easily, as non-hurtful of a way as I could come up with. But obviously that was not the way he was. And, looking back on our relationship, he treated me like crap all the time. But those moments where he didn't, I lived for those. But so here I was in terrible, terrible pain. And I called my mother for comfort. I was hysterical. I was, here I found out he'd been cheating on me and he had just done these terrible things to me. And my mom sighed and got angry at me. She was upset that I had ruined, like, she took his side. She never really said it was okay that he cheated on me, but she blamed me for that relationship. She saw him as this wonderful man. And, in her mind, once again, here's someone who can't bear to be with my horrible daughter. I have had dating relationships and friendships that ended with me being hurt so badly it took years to recover and to move on because of missing red flags, because of not recognizing when somebody was unhealthy. And so now let's fast forward. Here I am. I much better understand my situation. I know the disorder that my mother has. I understand that she abuses me. I've taken the steps to better myself, to protect myself from that abuse so that I can heal and be healthy. And yet that very process, as we just talked about last week, caused me to lose other relationships in my life. As I grew as a person, I grew out of some friendships. There were some friendships I came to recognize. Now I can see that they were unhealthy, and so I just naturally, sort of drifted away. I've had people turn against me. My mom manipulated my sister into blaming me for everything that happened. And I ultimately had to go no contact with my sister because she was being so awful to me. And so even as we're healing, even as we're recovering, we end up being hurt by people even more. I remember when I first went no contact with my mother, and I joined a social media group for people who were in my shoes. They were estranged from their mothers. And I shared a little bit about what had happened, and so many people told me to prepare to start losing people and having people turn on me, and I just didn't believe it. I insisted, no, I'm sorry that happened to you, but that would never happen. There's no way people in my life would do this to me. But I was wrong. One by one, My mom has gone to people and influenced their perspective of me. She's done all she can to save face because she can't stand how that makes her look. The fact that she has a daughter who would choose to basically be an orphan over having any amount of contact with her at all. So she has to do what she can to make herself look very good. She's the victim and I'm the problem, since she can't ever admit to any wrongdoing. And so one by one, people have either walked away from me completely or they've blamed me for everything. And they've said things that no victim of abuse should ever be told. And so all of this combined, it creates such a perfect storm for us. The pain that we've experienced from these happenings were so intense, it can seem natural to believe that what's the best choice for us is to close ourselves off from the world and to protect ourselves. We seek a feeling of safety by just keeping to ourselves. And I understand it's normal to want to feel safe. Everyone wants to feel safe. And we've not really had many places, if any, where we do feel safe. So it can seem like, okay, I'm now willing to take some extreme measures. I'm just going to have a life where it's me, myself, and I, so I can finally feel safe. I've talked with some of you on this channel in the comments on various videos who have expressed, you've said, you just have such an extreme lack of trust in the world and in others that you don't have friendships and you don't want them. And I get it, I do. I went for a while where I felt like that I would just never trust anyone ever again. And I began working on accepting that friendships and relationships were just not something that were meant for me. And I had to learn to be happy with just myself. But if you've decided that relationships just aren't for you, or that the relationships you do have will always be shallow because you're in this constant state of anticipation, for the shoe to drop, for something really bad to happen, it's understandable you would feel that way. That has been the pattern in your life. I know for me, when these people hurt me, it felt like it came out of nowhere. Like that relationship I talked about earlier. I thought we were going to be getting married soon. I had no idea any of this was happening. The signs were there. I missed them. But how I perceived the situation at the time was that we were madly in love. We were going to be getting married. And it just felt like, it was for me. It fell from the sky out of nowhere that he was leaving me and didn't care. And so when you don't even have, and I've had something like that happen many times where it just suddenly ended. I didn't even see it coming. So of course you're going to always be in this perpetual state of, hypervigilance to be ready for that, because it's kind of swung out of left field so many times. And yes, the safest place can seem to be to just shut ourselves off from the world. But hear me out on this. And I say this with so much empathy and understanding. But that just isn't a way to truly live. It's not. It's not a way for us to thrive. And I want for me, and I want for you, for us all to have lives where we're not just living, we're not just getting through the day, but we're thriving. I deserve that. You deserve it. You deserve a life where you are thriving. Humans are biologically designed for connection. We're tribal people. Look at how we lived for almost 200,000 years. We lived in small tribes that lived their lives together, and everyone helped everyone else. That's how we're made to function. One of the most precious and joyous experiences we can have as human beings is a deep connection with other human beings. Don't miss out on that. Please don't miss out on that. You deserve to experience that and to have that. And I know for many of you out there listening to this, the thought of putting yourself out into the world again is so terrifying. It's so scary, it might seem impossible. Just the fear of making ourselves vulnerable can be paralyzing. So what do we do? Now that we've understood, now that we understand exactly, like we understand what's happened to us and why we're having the fears we have, how do we overcome these fears so we can try again to have healthy relationships? And the first thing to do before we even think about extending some trust to other people is to learn to trust ourselves. And you may be thinking, I do trust myself. That's why I feel safe with me. But the reality is, if you won't go out and have relationships with other people, you don't trust yourself. You don't trust yourself to see the red flags. You don't trust yourself to recognize whether a person or a relationship is healthy or unhealthy. You don't trust yourself to make wise decisions in relationships. So the first restoration of trust that needs to happen is learning to trust yourself. Just put it out there on the table. Your failures of the past. That relationship I talked about earlier with my ex, there absolutely were so many signs that this was a terrible person I was with, and I missed all of it. I was completely deluded and fell for all of his manipulations. And I don't need to feel badly about that. I don't need to feel shamed. I can look at myself from back then and show myself compassion, grace, and forgiveness. I forgive myself, recognizing that I was a helpless victim at that time of an insidious form of abuse. I didn't understand what was going on with me. I didn't understand what had happened to me. I was doing the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time. And so I look at myself back then, not as, oh, you stupid, how could you miss all this? I see myself from then and offer myself an extraordinary level of compassion and grace. And now I can feel proud of myself because I've gone from being this helpless victim of this form of abuse to now being a person who is reclaiming my life. I'm not that person anymore. I have so much more knowledge now. I have so much more understanding. And it's not just the learning, it's the accomplishments that we've made that have gotten us to where we are right now. It's not just, oh, I'm so proud because I read a couple of books and now I better understand. Think about what you've accomplished so far. To even be here on this channel means that you've come to accept that your mother, or I know some of you it's not a mother, it's someone in your life, but most of you it's your mother, who has a terrible, incurable disorder called narcissistic personality disorder of the covert type. That means you have had to stand up and accept such a terrible, harsh reality. You've had to see, not only does my mom not really love me, not only does she not show me love and care, but she never, ever will, no matter what I do. To make such a declaration to yourself and to accept that as your truth takes immense bravery and courage. You are not that helpless victim anymore. That's over. So show yourself before, the one that just didn't understand what was going on, compassion and grace for what was done to you. And now acknowledge how courageous you have been. You're different now. And our failures of the past do not have to dictate how we feel about ourselves today. I want you to repeat these words after me. And I want you to mean them. And if you find them hard to say, then rewind a little bit and say them again and again and again until they become a part of who you are. I want you to say it out loud audibly. Find somewhere, if you're not alone, where you can sit, and I want you to speak these things out loud. My failures of my past do not define who I am today. I am a trustworthy person. I can trust myself. I'm a safe person. And I trust myself. Make that your meditation if you need to in the coming days. Build your trust in yourself. And know that when you're ready and you try to develop relationships with other people and improve your social skills and things like that, trust you'll be able to do it and you'll be more wise this time. You're now ready for those things. I want you to know that I'm proud of you for the steps that you've taken. Just by being here, you're showing your bravery and your strength. Please don't close yourself off from the world. I've mentioned before that my son and I traveled in a travel trailer for a couple years, and we got to know some people in the RV community. Man, there's just some amazing people out there. I was able to better engage with people in that setting because we were all full-time travelers. This relationship was only going to go so far, and so I was able to make myself more vulnerable because there was a natural end to these relationships after a week or two or a month at the most. And because of that, because I let my guards down and got to know a lot of people, I mean, there are people I met and got to know that I just carry with me in my heart every day. And I'm so thankful I got to meet them. And that's a lesson to me on how much we need others in our lives. Please don't just live. I want you to thrive. You deserve to thrive. I'll see you next week. And please remember, to all my fellow survivors, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are beautiful, whether your mom sees that or not.